it over to Howard and yourself. So thank you all for joining.
Great tips. Thank you very much. I know I certainly look forward to this. I've really enjoyed ethics for quite some time. And we've even been blessed to have Mr. Groble, who's the Damer South African Ethics Officer and Governance. So I'm hoping he can ask lots of difficult questions. But if not, let's see how we do. Thanks, Arnoud. Thanks for your time. I really look forward to this discussion.
Yes. All right. So let me see how can we switch to my presentation? I think like this.
If you just share, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah, there we go. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arnoud Engelfriet. I'm a Dutch IT lawyer and Chief Knowledge Officer at my firm in Amsterdam. I'm also author of the book AI and Algorithms, Mastering Legal Ethical Compliance, which you can buy, for example, on Amazon. And I wrote the book as part of our course of becoming a certified AI compliance officer, which is a duty to take care of when you are dealing with the EU AI Act. The book goes beyond merely what the law states, but actually also extends into the ethical requirements and considerations when developing AI. We will be talking about that, so I will touch upon the law. If you have legal questions or concerns, please enter them. But I will also be talking about the ethical considerations surrounding the legal ones, because the AI Act is a very complex law, especially if you consider that many of its provisions are actually created to reflect those ethical underpinnings into some form of legal requirements. First of all, I show you some headlines from around the world of what's happening with AI and especially the risks around AI. There's a lot of talk about bias, making distinction based on ethical backgrounds, skin color, gender is a particular concern as well. But there are also other biases where people from poor regions are less able to use AI because it was designed with rich Western people in mind. There's also some concerns that AI will take over the world or destroy humanity. That appears to be a little more far-fetched. In practice, we do not see that kind of development. Perhaps some of it is going on in Ukraine with all the drone fighting going on. But most of the time, we should be concerned with more lower-level issues, such as, for example, self-driving cars that have long been a utopia and now start to become reality somewhat, which image recognition and systems making ethical decisions. For example, this car is driving over here. And if there is an issue now, should it bump into the passenger or the person walking on the right with the white cap? Or should it actually run into one of the big trucks on the left if for some reason it cannot just go straight ahead? That used to be a mere thing that would happen, and now it is actually something you have to program for. Howard, you're raising your hand.
Yes, I just want to check, is it okay if we ask you questions during the talk, or would you like to keep them till the end?
Sorry. Yes, please, during the talk. It's much more convenient.
Right.
I will try to monitor the chat, or maybe Howard can monitor the chat for me.
I will do that. So just to ask you in this regard, there was always an issue of who will be held responsible for an accident. Will it be the designer, the organization? Has that been resolved in terms of holding anybody responsible for these accidents here?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Who would be legally liable or responsible for any mistakes that the self-driving car works? In Europe, the foundation underpinning the AI Act is called the Product Safety Legislative Framework, which basically says that the product must be safe when it is operated in the usual course. So that would put liability squarely with the producer, the company, and also the seller. So you would go to the dealership and say, my car killed somebody, you are liable for damages. So that's certainly a possibility.
Thank you.
There have been other approaches, which is actually very interesting. So let me digress into that. In the US, for example, there have been some examples to say, let's declare that nobody is legally liable for this type of thing, but instead every producer of autonomous cars has to contribute to a certain fund. And every time there is an accident from this type of car, the fund will pay out as a sort of mandatory insurance, which avoids the lawsuits, the punitive damages which they have in the US, and similar things. So it makes it a bit easier for people to innovate. This mechanism is actually used for medication, where, of course, medication can kill somebody. But if you can get sued out of existence, you would not make new medication. We want new medication, so that's also a possibility.
Thank you.
A related story which happened in the Netherlands 2 years ago, I machine translated it. This is a guy from the Netherlands. As you may know, in the Netherlands, it's illegal to drive while holding a phone in your hand. So whether you are calling or messaging or something else, doesn't matter. And we have a smart cameras, as we call them, which detect this type of behavior so that police officers don't have to look at it all the time. As you can see here, this guy is named Tim, and he was holding his hand up. And as his story goes, he was scratching his head, yet the machine detected that he was holding a phone. Well, I can somewhat see why, but as I'm going to show you on a little movie, this may actually be a bug in the system. Tim is actually a data scientist, so he figured out the software that the police were using. This is open source software, freely available on the internet, so he just downloaded that like anybody could, set it up on his work computer, and then tried it out. This 1 minute, there's no sound, but observe carefully what is happening. In the middle, we see a person, and the person is showing a cell phone, 87% certainty. Now look at that. According to the machine, there's a phone there, but as we all could see, no phone. So this is a type of thing that happens with AI a lot of times, which is called a false positive problem, where the machine detects something that isn't there. The converse is called the false negative problem, which means that the system misses something that is happening. Both can be a problem, but often systems are not designed all that much with the actual false positives in mind, because the system is unable to detect them or properly work with them. In the case of Tim, there is a system where a police officer will look at the photos that the system has detected as a positive. So this particular photo was shown to a police officer saying, the system thinks he's holding a phone while driving, so please confirm. And then the police officer confirmed it, which is interesting because if you or I look at the photo, we probably won't see a phone there. But it could be that the person was actually primed to expect phones, because if your job is confirming this type of photo, you will see a lot of situations where people actually have a phone in their hands. So in practice, this police officer is going to see only real positives. So at some point, he might be going, yes, 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 all the time. And that's actually a big issue with artificial intelligence. Another thing with AI is that they may somehow distort reality. This is a famous photo that came about in the United Kingdom, where a woman was putting on wedding dresses, and her friend Tessa made a picture with the iPhone. Now, the iPhone has AI in it. It does not merely capture a photo, but it takes multiple photos and then stitches them together to produce the best total image of the situation that was there. Now, look carefully, and you will see that in the two big mirrors that were in front of the bride-to-be, she is holding her hands in two different ways. And in actual fact, she's holding her hands in a third pose. According to all experts, this would have been an actual photo. There is no sign of manipulation afterwards, no photoshopping, nothing. This comes straight out of the raw data that is stored in the iPhone. So if this type of thing can happen using AI, then what can we still trust? There's at least one judge in the United States, in the state of Washington, that in April of this year has decided he does not want to look at videos if there has been some AI post-processing. For example, detecting particular items or scanning for the presence or absence of certain artifacts. He only wants to see the real deal. And this is actually a very big problem. There have been some efforts to combat this type of problem. The content credentials proposal from Adobe, for example, is one of them. And the idea is here that any photo editing tool should embed metadata that cannot be easily removed, identifying changes, originals, etc. So, for example, with the picture here of the penguins in the desert, you would be able to reconstruct that the penguin came from a photo in Antarctica, that there was a desert photo where they have been combined, and AI generated some form of ice block like you see here. So that's not an actual ice block, it was generated by AI. If you put that kind of system in place, then you will be able to combat this type of image to some extent, because you will be able to see that it goes back to an iPhone, but you still have the fundamental problem that your capturing moment was not original. So that is going to fundamentally challenge what we perceive as evidence or recordings of the real world and so on. Now, I'm sure there's some lawyers in the audience. You may have heard of the American case, also known as South African case. I'll bring that up in a moment, but there have been several lawyers that actually use ChatGPT and similar tools to generate legal documents, which they then file in court. And then the problem is always it hallucinates. It produces fake cases in this particular situation. It will present information that is factually incorrect, yet we rely on it. For those of you not in the know, this also happened in South Africa in July of 23, where there was a lawyer who also generated cases with ChatGPT that actually did not exist, and he was rebuked over it. And the judge was very upset over this misuse of technology. So how does that happen? I think a key issue here is that we regard AI systems as peers, as humans, because we call it intelligence, artificial intelligence. And when you do that type of thing, you associate human behavior, human knowledge, and other human characteristics to the computer system. And that's quite dangerous because they are not human. They do not reason like humans. They do not even have facts or knowledge systems from which to evaluate facts. They merely apply statistics to derive likely outcomes. And when you replace legal arguments or true-false discussions with statistically likely outcomes, you fundamentally alter the way that society interacts with each other. Whether it is legal arguments being presented or cases being decided or labeling people as fraudsters or merely how you interact with each other. That is quite a big deviation from what we have right now. We also see other changes. I will not pay all too much attention to it. But right now there is a very big discussion going on about using data. All these big AI systems require a lot of data to be trained on. So all the large social networks are looking at the vast data that they have from their users, all the chats that you have on WhatsApp, all the discussions and the profile updates that you did on LinkedIn, with Facebook, Instagram. All the networks have enormous amounts of data that these providers want to unlock and train AI on. So that's something that's going on. I actually found in October there's a lawsuit against LinkedIn going on, arguing that there should have been consent from the actual users instead of merely updating the terms of use. And that's actually going forward. I haven't seen any resolution about it yet, but it was only filed last week. So that may be something interesting to follow. Then I figured, let's figure out what kind of laws South Africa has on artificial intelligence. It turns out right now there is not much. But there is, in August, there was a proposal for a national AI policy framework, which actually sets the tone. I see somebody in the chat.
Yes, that's Paul Grobler asked the question. Does anyone know about the SA Artificial Intelligence Association or knows someone from there? So I think that's to the community. Paul, is that correct?
Yes, please don't continue with the presentation. I just thought I could ask this in the chat.
All right. Okay.
That's
okay.
Good. Thank you. Please feel free to respond. So what's happening in South Africa is actually happening in a lot of countries around the world. There's quite some companies that do AI legislative trackers. But what you see most of the time is that there is not so much legislation going on as it is frameworks or blueprints or things like that to set the tone. Because for many countries, it's still very early. It could be a fundamental strategic choice to rely more on AI, or you want to rely on it less because it is big tech, big American tech that provides all these systems. The United States itself does not have any real laws on artificial intelligence, but rather is working on frameworks, guidelines, and the like, and is trying to address mishaps with AI with specific legislation. So the use of AI for discriminatory hiring is something that's going to be addressed. They are working on new legislation for data protection and privacy. We also see this in other countries. For example, in India, they have the Digital India Act, where data protection, automated decision making, and the like will be a part. In South Korea, there is some work being done on what should be trustworthy AI that should become in place. In Brazil, and to an extent in Chile, we see some legislation coming up that they are actually calling AI Act, so complete laws that regulate what AI should or shouldn't do. And those laws, and the few others around the world, are all mirrored on the European Union's AI Act that entered into force on August 1st. Now, to be clear, you may have heard both that there is an AI Act and that there is something that's called the Treaty on AI. Europe is a little complicated in that there are different institutions in there. The AI Act is from the European Union, which is the economic area that works together on a lot of policy situations. And we have the Council of Europe, which is an older organization concerned with human rights. They instituted the European Court of Human Rights, but they are independent from the European Union. They don't make laws, they make treaties. And one of the treaties that they recently made is called the Treaty on AI, which is an international treaty that is supposed to be signed by countries all around the world to provide a baseline, a minimum, if you want, on responsible or trustworthy AI. We already know that the AI Act meets the treaty, but for example, if South Africa were to accede to the treaty, it would then have to adopt a law that at the minimum reflects what's in the treaty. It may go beyond that, like Europe did, and it may stay at the level, but it may then not go below that level. So this is an interesting development to follow.
And sorry, Arnoud, I do believe that Saudi published one last year sometime, or if I remember correctly, I saw the paper, but I'm not sure if it's gone into an act status at this point in time.
I don't think they actually have laws in the works. Let me just quickly look that up. I will share a link now in the chat, which is from the law firm White Case, where they do an AI regulatory tracker around the world. So you can pick out almost any country in the world and see what they have, where they are, and what the latest developments are. So what I see here is AI ethics principles, but no regulations. So this is, yeah, if you're concerned about the world, monitor that space. It gets updated about every 3 months, depending on the country where you are.
Thank you.
All right. So in Europe, we have the AI Act, which is a formal European law that applies in all the countries of the EU and even to some extent to entities outside of the EU. The basic idea is that we want to regulate, speaking for all of Europe, that we want to regulate AI affecting our citizens, our businesses, and our society. So the basic rule, and this is quite expensive, is you are covered by the AI Act if you offer an AI as a service or as a product, embedded or not, in the European Union, which is all the countries that you may be familiar with, not the United Kingdom because they left, but also Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein, but also not Switzerland, for example, or Turkey. They're outside the EU. If you are in the EU, you have a place of business there, and that place of business operates AI, that's also covered by the EU. So far, pretty simple. If you bring it from outside into, so you're like an importer or a distributor, you are also covered. If you use AI in a way that people in the EU are directly affected, that also triggers the act. And notably, third point, if you produce AI output outside the EU, but then people import it back into the EU, you as the producer, so the AI operator, are affected. For example, I'm a Dutch company, I have human resources questions, I find a firm in, let's say, South Africa, and I upload you my personnel files and I say, use AI, please, to pick out the best candidates to promote to management. You would then give me a list of the 10 best people and a report from the AI that you have. And based on that report, I would take action. This would trigger for both you and for me the AI Act's applicability. So that's going to be a lot of work. So there's already, the law is only less than a month in force, but already it has made huge waves. You may have heard that Apple is going to delay the launch of some of its AI features in Europe. And in the news, this is always reported as due to the AI Act. Apple would be afraid of its regulations, it would be too strict and it would be unable to innovate. But actually, this is part of a legal battle that is very different from the AI Act. Apple is basically concerned that it has to break open its app store and allow other people to deploy their own app stores, which would then install and sell apps onto the iPhone. And that's something Apple does not like because with their monopoly, they make a lot of money. And they are using the AI Act as an argument for journalists to pretend that this is what they are actually concerned about. The AI Act, like I said, is not the only law that we have in place here. I already mentioned the Digital Markets Act, the DMA, but there is a whole plethora of legal instruments that the EU is developing. It's called the Digital Decade, where they are basically reshaping the entire digital environment. So there's laws coming, GDPR we already have, AI Act we have now, and there's going to be changes to labor law. There are rules in place on data that is not related to persons. There's a lot of cybersecurity regulations coming up. Intellectual property, IP, is becoming a very important topic, especially, like I said, with the reuse of all these vast data sets. Rules on product safety are going to be changed. And they all exist independently. And if you are looking for legal compliance, you need to comply with all of them. Unfortunately, we don't have a single law on AI. You have a lot of laws that you also have to go through and figure out, is this allowed under the AI Act? Is this allowed under GDPR? Is it allowed in the labor law? Do we infringe any copyrights? And so on. So that's quite a job for the legal people. So let's delve into the AI Act and what this means. Fun fact about that, nobody said let's delve in until 2 years ago, and now everybody's doing it. If you look at abstract databases, you will also always see a big jump in people using the word delve, which is actually a ChatGPT artifact. It is very fond of that particular phrase. And so it appears in a lot of abstracts, and it's one of the easiest tells whether something was written by AI. So what does the AI Act do? The AI Act has been referred to as a risk-based regulation, but that's not the same as saying you have to evaluate risks and you have to take actions. The lawmakers themselves made the risk analysis and made the classification, and based on the classification, they declared what the rules are going to be. So there is a risk-based approach, but it's not the same as you have to be careful. You have to do what the law says. There are 3 main categories. There are some AI that is prohibited. There are some AI that is high risk. And there's some AI that has transparency risk. Transparency risk basically means people might be affected when they don't know this is an AI. So if you have a chatbot from an e-commerce store, the chatbot needs to identify itself so that you know I'm not talking to a human. For example, if it makes legal statements like I'm going to give you a refund, that's not binding because you knew it was a chatbot. So that type of risk needs to be addressed. And then there's also rules on the general purpose AI systems, which are the big AIs like ChatGPT, which I already mentioned, Copilot from Microsoft, Anthropic, and the many other models, Google, Gemini or Bard that are out there. But I leave them out of scope. The main discussions about regulation will be about the first 2, the prohibited AI and the high-risk AI, where the prohibited practices are actually quite easy. They should be off the market. You cannot do that type of stuff at all in the EU. And the high-risk AI is the stuff that you will get a lot of regulations on you. So let me first highlight the prohibited practices. The basic approach of the AI Act is to provide both a great level of protection for society, but also to provide legal clarity as much as is possible with the law. So it actually states what is prohibited. There's a list. And of course, you can still have discussions whether you are covered by the list, but it's very different from, say, GDPR, which basically says, take care of risks, think about which risk may occur, and then take measures to protect them. So that is a very different and very refreshing approach. The prohibited practices, there's 7 of them in the AI Act. If you do manipulation or exploitation of people, for example, an interface with an AI that convinces you to buy more than you wanted, that would be illegal. If you do emotion recognition at the workplace or at school, those 2 places I mentioned, then you are violating the AI Act. And there's a couple of rules on biometric regulation, profiling and real-time remote recognition of people in groups. So this is usually quite limited, except for the emotion recognition, which a lot of people trigger when they use AI for human resources. But the other systems should not really affect most systems operators in practice. So for most of these systems, we face a discussion whether they are high risk. And high risk is not the same as we can think of risks that are very concerning, but rather means that according to the lawmaker, your AI system is covered and will get a lot of extra regulations. Europe has a long system of regulating products and services like production machines, high pressure pumps, medical devices, airplanes, and so on. If an AI system is used for one of those products, it's automatically called high risk. If it's not, and that will be most of the time, then you have to look at a big list, which is at the back of the AI Act. So you can actually pull up the list and see whether you are doing it. And if you're doing one of these things, you are in principle high risk. There are some exceptions, which you must motivate. So put in writing, have it signed by a lawyer, and then you may be able to claim that your system is actually not high risk, despite being on the list. For example, I already mentioned AR. Any AI used for recruitment and selection is covered by the AI Act as a high risk use case. For life insurance and health insurance, AI system would also be high risk. But for different type of insurance, like car insurance, there is no high risk classification because, put simply, it's not on the list. So it's a very black-white analysis that you can easily apply and determine whether you are covered by the AI Act or not. This is important because if you are high risk, you get a lot of requirements on you that mainly have to do with documentation and monitoring of what your system is doing. So you have to demonstrate that your system is in compliance and has met all the requirements and standards. This is of course quite difficult because AI system technology is very new. So it's very hard for a company to just say, yeah, we comply with everything. Europe has a system for that. You may be familiar with this logo. This is a Conformity Européenne, or European conformity, the standardized symbol since the 1970s or 1980s actually, where a manufacturer says this product complies with all the relevant EU regulations. So they make this statement on their product. You will find it on any plug or battery or things like that in the European Union. And if you see that, you know it is safe, or at least supposed to be safe. How do we know that it is safe? That's because the EU has introduced a system of standards, what the EU calls harmonized standards or common specifications. I will not go into the detail, but the point is that somewhere out there is a technical standard saying what a plug should look like, or how a battery should be designed, what type of things concretely and specifically should be in there to make sure that that battery is safe. So if a product has this logo, you know that somewhere there has been a certification against the standard and the manufacturer says, I'm okay, this product is safe. And if it's not safe, you can sue me for damages. Let me check if there's any questions. Oh, Howard, I see your hand was raised.
Yes, I wanted to ask you a few questions on some of those prohibitive AI now, and just some thoughts on from yourself on the LinkedIn thing, because I suppose I see LinkedIn doing social credits in terms of rating of influencers, and then also in terms of employment for recruiters in matching and things like that. Is that what we are talking about here?
No. So when we're referring to emotion recognition, that really means looking at your face or your posture and saying, oh, you must be happy, or you are angry at this customer, or you are upset. So there is something going on with you. That's the type of thing that the AI bans, because at the workplace, this can have a very significant impact. And it's not a proven technology. One thing that some people might be concerned about is called the social credit systems. You may have heard the stories from China where there's biometrics cameras out there and they will say, oh, you jaywalked, or you didn't wear your seatbelt in the car, so you get points for this, points for that. Oh, you helped an older lady cross the street, so you get some extra points. You did grocery shopping for your sick neighbor, you get extra points for that. And then if you fall below the threshold, you can no longer fly by airplane, but you must take the train. So you must work hard, be social, and earn back your credit. That type of system has been banned. Concern is that in many cases, AI systems give out demerits and credits for particular functioning. Like in school, whenever you make an assignment, you get some points, so you get an average. You may get some extra tuition. If you fall below, you may be excluded from certain activities if you fall too low. And then there are always concerned whether this is a form of social credit system. Fortunately, the definition, so the prohibition actually is quite limited. So it has to be a long time credit demerit system that gives you extra points on the merit points. Usually this would not be covered, but an employer that would assign scores, do weekly evaluations. And then if you are high enough, you can go to management and you get a bonus and that type of thing. That could be in the danger zone.
Thank you.
All right. So going back to the standards, your first job, if you want to introduce high-risk AI into the EU, is to make sure that you have measured compliance with this standard. And then once you have established this, you will apply the logo. And there's more. You also have to monitor the market for things that may go wrong. So there could be mistakes, there could be problems, production could be faulty, and you will have to address that. And according to the AI Act, you actually have to actively monitor the market and make sure that no incidents happen. And when they start to happen, you intervene immediately. And you have to report that to the supervisory authorities, who will then work with you to resolve the situation. You may also get fined or get other sanctions imposed against you, and those can be quite severe. For using the prohibited AI, that could be up to 35 million euros. Not sure how much that is in South Africa, but it's a lot of money. For the other violations, it's 15 million euros. And for certain more administrative things, it's 7.5 million euros. Those are the maximum penalties, obviously. But like with GDPR, in any case, it will be very significant if your company or organization gets hit by that. There's also a civil liability to consider, which basically means that people can sue you. So not just a fine by the authorities, but a person that was, for example, injured by an AI or has suffered damage to property or a loss of data, for example. For that type of thing, there's new legislation in the works that will allow you to sue a company that deployed an AI, and then you have to demonstrate that you had damage as a result of the AI. For example, it did not comply with the AI Act, does not provide the expected safety. And then we have a unique system where the burden of proof is reversed. So that means that the guy that deployed the AI system must prove that it was fully compliant with the AI Act and that it has made no mistake. If it cannot show that, and it should have, because it would have those harmonized standards. So it should have been able to prove that it was in compliance. If it cannot demonstrate that, then it's automatically liable. It cannot limited liability or exclude it or something like that. You would be liable and you would have to pay all these damages. So that's a pretty big consequence if you do not properly take care of your AI system. So a lot of companies are now studying the list of high risk. Are we a high risk AI? What can we do to avoid that classification? And what do we have to do if it is a high risk classification? I will walk through some key points that you will have to pay attention. The first and most important requirement if you deploy AI is to have proper human oversight. The law basically says it has to be appropriate to the circumstances, so there's no fixed rule like it has to be 2 people or something like that, but we have some guidelines. They have to be properly trained, they have to be actually able to override the AI system, and they may have the requirement to use 4 eyes, so 2 people independently overseeing the AI system. There's many different ways of overseeing AI. And based on your organization, you're going to have to make a choice. For example, do we put the human in the decision making? Do we give the humans ultimate control? Or do we merely have them oversee the autonomous system and then intervene when something goes wrong? So there's a big red button, and if something goes wrong, you will hit that button and the system will stop. Depending on the circumstances, each of your situations may be appropriate. So this is something for you to evaluate. What do we consider important? And how do we want to intervene? But there's more. A second point, and I already saw some people wanting to ask questions about this data governance, so this is your chance. One key aspect in all AI systems is that there is going to be a lot of data. So that data needs to be taken care of, and that process is generally called data governance. Data governance is the concept where you ensure that you have a high data quality throughout the complete life cycle of the data, and you have proper controls to make sure that the data stays that way. So you are able to say this data set is diverse, it is complete, it has been tested and evaluated for the particular circumstances, and that's something that we want to address. So you need to have a policy in place, you need to have procedures in place, and you need to make sure that your data is being processed in that particular way. So this is not just about copyright, for example, it's also not just about bias, but it's about all aspects of making sure that your data is of high quality and supports the use case that you are deploying the AI system for.
So I know whilst you're
Yes.
talking there, I know we've got a privacy impact assessment or a PIA. Is there a corresponding EIA for an ethical impact assessment that data governance should be performing?
So data governance is also supposed to become one of those harmonized standards. So it's not so much you will do your own impact assessment and determine based on that what the key aspects are. There's going to be a standard or multiple standards that define data quality. I heard ISO is also working on an ISO standard for machine learning data quality and machine learning data principles. So that will be the way to go. The AI Act does have the instrument of what they call the Fundamental Rights Impact Assessment, which is comparable to instruments like the Algorithmic Impact Assessment or the Data Protection Impact Assessment that you may have heard of. But that is an additional feature that's only required by deployers of AI in the public sector, because what they are using will typically affect citizens. So a lot of people that can be harmed in fundamental rights, like your freedom of speech or your ability to operate a business or access to essential services like welfare. So they have to perform one of those impact assessments. But for private entities, they don't have to do that type of impact assessment because the lawmaker has already, using this list, told them there is high risk if you are doing one of these things. And if you were doing one of these things, you will need to stop because it's prohibited. So there's no real need for you to do an open-ended analysis of the impact of your system.
Right.
It's still a good idea because when you're using AI systems, you may hit on many unintended purposes and you will have to find them, and you will have to identify them. This is one of the cases I've been using for a very long time. This is the program Zoom, competitor to Teams, that you're probably familiar with, which has a background removal system that is very sensitive to various issues. As you can see here, the gentleman on the left has his head removed when you apply the virtual background, whereas the person on the right is not thusly affected. The issue here is, of course, that the algorithm sees a lot of white light coming in, very bright light here, and a very dark space in the middle, and it interprets that as one of the curtains between the windows, so removes the head. And that's obviously a very unfortunate accident. You could interpret it as a bias issue, but this system is not actually designed or to discriminate against certain people or to exclude certain people from using their service. They simply haven't tested it in enough situations. And the expectation, of course, is that with proper data governance, you will be able to capture this type of situation. So that's one of your responsibilities if you are deploying AI in the European Union. A second feature that's actually going to be quite difficult for a lot of companies is that you have to be able to report what you are doing. Your systems have to be auditable. You need to have logging in place so that you can reconstruct any of the situations that led to problems or to risks. You need to be able to figure out, why did it happen with this particular person? Why did we filter out this particular message? Or why did we exclude that particular person from applying to a job at our company? You also need to be able to report that, so up the chain and maybe even to the supervisory authority. And like I said earlier, you have to be transparent to people when you are using AI, what the status of the system as AI actually is. This all comes together in the concept of what the AI calls accountability. You have to have an accountability framework, and here's where the ethics begin, because accountability is more than just compliance with the law. It shows that you are willing to take responsibility for your system. So compliance with the law means we do whatever the law says, but accountability also shows that you are willing and able to address what happens if you go beyond the law, you break the law, you do something the law has not regulated, or somebody is harmed by your system. Accountability says that you will take care of it. For example, if you have an HR system that discriminates and excludes women from applying for your position, for example, that will be against the law. You would be fined by supervisors, and the courts may order you to pay damages to these women that have been excluded. But accountability would be something different. That would be going to these women and saying, we're sorry that this happened. We will let you apply again, and this time a human will look at your system. Because you did something wrong, you excluded them from the wrong reason, so you should now include them and reevaluate them for the right reasons. That's not a legal requirement, that's an ethical requirement, and that should be part of your accountability framework. So accountability, like I teach in the book, is a mechanism by which you on the one hand do compliance and reporting, which you talked about a moment ago, but also you deal with supervision and enforcement. The ideal here is to have proactive accountability, which means that you put accountability as a core value of your organization. You are doing accountability because you feel it's the right idea, it's the good thing, it's a thing that you want to have, and you want to prevent risks. A lot of times you see reactive accountability. We do it because we have to. You implement it when an incident happens, then you figure out what happened here, what went wrong, how can we minimize the penalties that will come to us. So that's damage limitation. There's a good paper by Novelli, Taddeo, and Flori that you can read about accountability in AI. I recommend it in the book. There's a lot of literature references that you can rely on. And it also teaches you on how to establish a proactive accountability mechanism in your organization. So like I said, that's a requirement from the AI Act, but you need to take it a little further and make sure that it aligns with your core values. And if you want to align with core values, then of course you need to have those core values. And that's actually quite a big challenge. I will talk about that in a moment. Howard, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, there was an announcement, or someone made an announcement that Microsoft let its or retrenched its ethics department a week before they released Copilot. I don't know if you saw that, and I don't know what the truth of it is, but I was fascinated in they almost were intimating that it was slowing down the delivery of Copilot into the wild.
Yes, I heard about that. That was in March last year when Microsoft
That's right.
fired its entire ethics team. They still have their office yet, but I think it has never been clarified why it was fired. But one of the issues was the closer cooperation between Microsoft and OpenAI, which more or less now has led to Microsoft integrating it as Copilot into their systems. And probably there were some ethical concerns over that. So that's a very big challenge. We have seen the same thing at Meta, which fired a lot of its ethics officers in the past 2 years. And Google, who has been firing some of the most high-profile people critical of AI. So this is a very big tension between, on the one hand, your business goals. Let me show you a graph of that. So your organizational goals, your ethics, and your legal requirements. In a good organization, you make this triad where you have legal requirements that may or may not apply to you, and you have your organizational goals that need to fit in the law at some point, and you have ethical guidelines that say where you stand as a company and where you want to go as a company. And your AI policy should address the overlap that I illustrated here at the bottom. You want the things that deal with the law that are legal and are ethical, and some things are left unregulated. They are not illegal, but the law simply does not address them. And then you have to do the things that are ethical, not because you have to, but because you want to. And that is quite the challenge. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we have established a program to train people to become AI compliance officers, which we call CAICO. That's a registered mark. There's an independent foundation that oversees the quality, and the idea is that you here established independent, strong-willed people that are able to convince an organization to go particular directions. We have also seen names like AI ethics officer or chief AI compliance or AI governance officer, IAPP you may be familiar with. They have the AI governance professional. It's a similar idea. Just speaking commercially for a second here, if anybody wants to explore this type of program in South Africa, please contact me separately. But the basic idea is you need somebody trained, you need somebody educated and capable of enforcing those accountability rules, making sure that your organization is willing to hold itself accountable. So moving back to this slide, I jumped ahead a little. Accountability is not the same thing as merely being transparent. Transparent is required also by the AI Act, but also if you want to be ethical, you have to be able to show what you did. If you cannot explain what you did, there's no way that you can be operating ethically because you cannot justify your decisions. You cannot explain your decisions. You cannot improve your decision making if you don't know why the system did what it did. So black boxes are out. But accountability goes beyond transparency. It's more than just explaining what you did. It's also standing behind and saying, yes, this was the right choice. The system should have done that. Or no, the system should not have done that. And instead, we are going to rectify it. We know what went wrong and we'll take responsibility for that and we will address it and improve it in the next situation. So that was this chart that I showed earlier. It actually mirrors the approach that the EU has chosen since 2018, where the idea is that addressing AI, which they call trustworthy AI, is done through 3 different mechanisms that interact with each other. AI should be lawful, so the law provides a minimum basis. If you go below that, we're going to have a problem because then you have illegal AI. But AI should also be ethical. It should be worthy of our trust. Literally the word trustworthy. And to do that, I will discuss in a moment, they have drafted a set of guidelines for trustworthy AI. And third, that's obviously a big issue. AI should be technically robust. It should be working well. It should be functioning in a way that we can rely on it. If it doesn't work, that's fine. If it's clear that it doesn't work, we can rely on it. But it should not make those hallucinations that we talked about earlier. That's not robust. You should be able to rely on it like your car. You turn it on and it drives. That's a reliable car. And if 1 in 4 times your car doesn't start, you don't have a very good car. You shouldn't want that type of car. So that's the framework that the EU is operating in. In the ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI published in 2019, and the basis for all the European legislation, so that's a very recommended read, you will find 4 ethical principles for all AI systems. There should be respect for human autonomy. This is where the human in the loop, the human control comes in. Prevention of harm. So that's taking care that AI systems do not make mistakes, that they are not biased, and so on. There should be fairness and there should be accountability. So those are the key pillars that any policy should be based on. And these 4 ethical principles, they translate into 7 requirements that are actually also the foundation of the book. Because each of these 7 requirements has been translated into a series of questions and points of attention, which the EU calls the assessment list for trustworthy artificial intelligence, or ALTI. And the basic idea when they made this system was that it was a self-assessment list. But my original purpose of the book, as we showed earlier, is to help you answer those questions. So you want to integrate the legal and the ethical aspects, and this book takes the ALTI assessment list, takes each of these questions and discusses it in the context of the AI Act and European legislation. What should I do by law, and what would be the ethical choices to go beyond that? And of course, you have multiple options. If you are within the law, then ethically one company can do one thing, one company can do another thing. If you are a non-profit or a school, you may want to do yet the third thing, and all that should be possible. But you should have the right information at your fingertips, making sure that you can make the right decisions. We have also taken the ALTI to the next level, not merely a self-assessment where you figure out, do I have this, do I not have this, but also a system that allows you to compare and analyze whether you are on the right track. So you do an initial assessment at the beginning of your project, and you can do updates as your project goes along. And then in the end, you can evaluate whether your product is doing well. This is more or less how you would use a fundamental right impact assessment, but you focus here more on the ethical aspects and not only on the risk aspects. In view of the time, are there questions I can take?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Arnoud. It's been like a big uplift in my understanding on what the EU is doing in AI. I really appreciate that. It's been really good. Any questions from anybody around? Paul, anything from your side?
Not particularly. I just realized how little I actually know. And
Yeah.
Thanks, Arnoud. You sort of you explain a lot of things, but it's just making the awareness possible, because then you have to delve into these things to see how it affects us when we are in a data management situation, right, or a project or an advisory context. So yeah, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Arnoud, the one thing that people have been talking lately about is some of the challenges with the LLMs in terms of holding on to data subjects, information about the data subject, and that right for erasure. I don't know how they would achieve that in terms of if you were to complain, to say please remove that. What is the situation in that area?
Yeah, we actually had a pretty intense situation about that from Italy, which noted that that type of thing was happening, and they basically banned the entire application ChatGPT because it could not guarantee GDPR compliance that way. That upset a lot of people, so that was reversed. The big issue with the big LLMs is they do not store data. They do not have like a reference set or a Wikipedia style source where they will just browse and say, oh, we'll say this about Mr. Howard Diesel, for example. They just make stuff up. They just generate what will be the nice next word.
Right.
What should I be saying based on more or less statistically what everybody is saying. So I do a lot of speaking, and every time I ask people, ask a bio from ChatGPT or your favorite LLM, and every time it comes up with something different. One time it says I was born in 1974, then it says I was born in 1979. Half the time it calls me a professor because it says somewhere that I work at the university. Things like that, because statistically seen, if somebody talks a lot about the law, they must be a law professor. And if you've written books, then in particular, statistically, you would be a professor. And that's the type of thing that's happening. How can you stop that? Well, you cannot go to the source and fix it because there is no source. There's no source on the internet. Yeah. So this is a fundamental problem that's very hard to address because these systems are just not designed to operate this way.
And what I saw was, it was interesting because I tried 7 different LLMs. I tried Copilot, and then I tried Meta AI. When I did Copilot, it gave me a whole lot of information. When I used Meta AI, it just says, sorry, this is about individuals and we're not allowed to divulge any information. So it was quite a different approach that these systems are using.
Yeah, so this is called the idea of guardrails. Rather than trying to fix the particular errors, you try to make guardrails that avoid the AI from going there at all. So you would just say, right, as a prompt, if it's about a person, avoid making statements, which of course solves the problem because you will never make mistakes about people, but it does severely hamper what you can do with the system. And there's always a discussion, what type of person should it apply to? I mean, to me, am I famous? No, probably should apply. But if we are talking about the king of the Netherlands, I
right.
would, yeah, it feels different somehow. But where to draw the line, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so any other questions? I know Arnoud has a hard stop. So one question just before last question. No. Great. Arnoud, thank you so much. It was really enjoyable and I really learned a lot. Thank you for your help.